There are a lot of questions about Switzerland. For instance, how a small and rural landlocked Alpine country became one of the richest in the world. Why is a country of 8.7 million people so much richer than its neighbors? How come they vote in elections with an outstretched hand instead of ballots? And why did this country mine roads and bridges all over its territory? What do they make money on, besides chocolate and watches? And what city is the actual capital of this amazing country? In the history of Europe, there have been many military conflicts. It's rather difficult to even name the exact number, but one thing is certain: Switzerland was last involved in an armed conflict over 200 years ago. But what about World War II? Okay, if we look closely at the Second World War events when the Nazi army occupied almost all of Europe, we will see that exactly in the center of this fastest bloodshed there is an untouched zone, and this is Switzerland. So it is true. Switzerland was never drawn into any armed conflict in the entire 20th century. Today, Switzerland remains neutral and avoids participation in armed conflicts. It is not a NATO member, nor a member of the European Union. But how is this possible? The fact is, Switzerland hasn't been at war with anyone since the Napoleonic Wars that began with the French Revolution. However, every Swiss is still obliged to serve in the army. In a country without a license, you can safely buy weapons. What's more, there are so many up-to-date bunkers and bomb shelters that in the event of an apocalypse or nuclear war, God forbid, on the European continent, Switzerland will be probably the only one to survive. Why is that? And how come this country managed to create a real military and economic fortress, as well as have the most educated and richest inhabitants on the planet? What is this miracle recipe? Well, let's start with the fact that the Swiss are the richest people in the world, and $91,616 is the average annual salary in Switzerland. And by the way, over the past 10 years, this value has also increased by 13.2%. The official Swiss poverty line is 2,600. By Swiss standards, you barely have enough to pay rent, medical insurance, clothes, and food. The unemployment rate is also fantastically low in Switzerland, with less than 2% of citizens idle for various reasons. If we look at all sorts of country ratings and the Life Quality Global Index, security, healthcare, climate, innovation, and prosperity, freedom, and happiness, we will see that Switzerland is the undisputed leader in mostly all of them. But what is the reason behind such figures? And there is not just one answer to this. Let's try to figure it out. So, close your eyes and think about what you associate with Switzerland. I bet you picture the Alpine mountains, green meadows, well-fed cows, milk, cheese, and chocolate. Well, yeah, it's all there. But it's not only a small part of Swiss exports. The income from them all combined is not even 1% of the Swiss economy. Well, next thought, maybe the famous Swiss watches and jewelry bring most of the money. Yep, Switzerland exports watches and jewelry, which adds up to about 8% of the economy. What about chemistry and pharmaceuticals? At another 7.4%. But it's still not much. So what does the country make money on? Let's discuss this for a bit. The main industries in Switzerland are banking and finance. The roots of modern Swiss banks go back to the early 19th century, when they were created to finance construction projects. One bank was opened by railway baron Alfred Escher and was then called Credit Bank. Now it is the largest investment bank in the world, Credit Suisse. But if large banks of that time were interested in large investments, they probably were all over global projects. Then what about ordinary people? Isn't it a must to develop the financial sector and provide services to the population? The Swiss National Bank was created in 1907. It was responsible for developing the country's monetary policy and issuing Swiss banknotes. After the First World War, the banking and financial sector suffered from all the crises, and all banks' assets were halved. What happened later? The country formed a policy of legal secrecy of banks. This decision was made before World War II, and this made Swiss banks the favorite of many wealthy Europeans and their money. And it seems okay to store someone's money and do not tell anyone about it, right? But the thing is, at the end of the 20th century, in 1996, the Swiss Central Bank openly admitted that during World War II, neutral Switzerland benefited from trading with the Reich Bank from Germany. Swiss banks didn't just buy public German assets, but also the assets of the Holocaust victims. as well as the occupied country's gold reserves. This way, Swiss banks indirectly financed the Nazis with billions of francs in credit lines. What's more interesting is that Hitler could have simply conquered Switzerland, just like France or Austria. But he knew that the Swiss were ready to defend themselves to every soldier's last drop of blood. Reckless military men dug about 1,000 tunnels throughout the impassable Alps and enforced highways, railways, and bridges with traps, along with demolition charges. This is how the country was getting ready for the invasion that would never happen. And by the way, Switzerland got rid of it all only in 2014. But at the wartime, the Swiss were ready to blow it all up overnight, go underground, and fight straight from their bunkers. The Swiss set up underground air bases and stored aircraft, crews, and supplies in caves. In fact, there were more than 8,000 bunkers scattered all over Switzerland, and some of them are still hidden. Whereas others have become real national rarities over the past 50 years, they turned into unique hotels, cheese cellars, mushroom factories, and museums. No wonder Hitler chose not to get involved with these guys, deciding that having a country with a neutral status nearby is more profitable than destroying it. Besides, he knew all about those wonderful banks and money. From 1939 to 1945, the Reichsbank Bank transferred 1.6 million Swiss francs of gold to its account in Bern. $440 million worth of Nazi gold, which is about $9.5 billion today, was stored in the Swiss National Bank in 1998. Rumor has it, more than half of it was looted over the years. Some of the accumulated wealth was used to fund the war, but the total expenditure remains unclear. The current whereabouts of the gold are the subject of research, several books, and conspiracy theories. So, now you're aware that Swiss banks have served as heaven for the wealth of honest entrepreneurs, as well as dictators, despots, mafiosi, corrupt officials, and all sorts of tax fraudsters. Oh well. Today, the financial sector remains an important sector of the Swiss economy, generating about 9% of the country's GDP. Swiss banks, UBS AG and Credit Suisse, are among the largest banks in the world. But the most interesting part is not even the banks. To understand why this country is so damn rich, we should look at it from the other side. What does it import? Switzerland imports mostly metals, equipment, and chemicals, among other stuff. But metals means gold. It is imported annually in about $87 billion, which is 21% of the country's total imports. And here's the first question. Where does Switzerland import its gold from? Okay, the gold, or rather unrefined gold that Switzerland buys, is originally mined in 90 different countries. About half of all the gold imported officially comes from the UK, the United Arab Emirates, or Hong Kong. 3 countries that do not produce gold themselves. Bear this in mind. The second question is, where do they actually have it from? From the countries of the Persian Gulf, the republics of South Africa, Latin America, small countries of Liberia, Ghana, Mali, and so on. In all of these countries, the gold or industrial mines are owned by large companies. On average, one mine produces about 1 to 1.5 tons of gold per year. There are cases where work is carried out in cooperation with NGOs or local associates and authorities. And although Switzerland officially speaks of the transparency of this industry and states that it doesn't cooperate with suppliers whose gold is obtained by questionable methods of artisanal and small-scale mining, in really, there are plenty of scandals and labor lawsuits. Yet, the Swiss always claim that suppliers are its customers and top it up with the term trade secrets. And here comes the third question. Why does Switzerland need so much gold? Switzerland is traditionally one of the world's most important gold trading centers, with 4 of the world's 7 largest refineries located on its territory. Refineries subject precious metals to cleaning, grinding, and melting at high pressure, and in the end, they get the same gold bars that are good to be exported and also purchased domestically by banks, industrial enterprises that produce components, electronic gadgets, and devices. Well, of course, manufacturers of watches and jewelry. This is a very highly profitable and strategically important sector of the economy. A modern refinery is a very complex production, which results in gold bar refined to a purity of 99.999%. And by the way, it is Switzerland that annually refines 70% of all gold ore that is mined on the planet. You wonder, who is the main buyer of Swiss gold? Mostly Swiss smelters process a wide variety of metals including gold, silver, platinum, and palladium on a massive scale, and the main buyers of Swiss gold are India, China, the United States, Germany, and the United Kingdom. What else is this country famous for today? Well, maybe the absence of the capital city makes people want it too. There are only two countries in the world without capital cities. There is Switzerland and the Republic of Nauru. If we Google Switzerland, we know it's a confederation, but actually it is a federal state of 20 cantons and 6 semi-cantons. And each of them has its own constitution, government, and police. Well, canton, by definition, is a subdivision of a country established for political or administrative purposes. So what's it all about? The cantons are somewhat similar to the States of America, since at one time the United States, by the way, was also not the United, but the Confederate States of America. But if in the USA the main and official language is English, then in Switzerland there are 4 official languages: German, Italian, French, and Romansh. And on top of that, everyone more or less knows English. Here's thanks to its education system. So, the cantons of Switzerland form an alliance of independent structures that jointly solve problems, and direct democracy successfully operates in this country. The amazing Swiss are proud of their civil rights and love referendums, which provide an opportunity to question any law, even approved by parliament, and propose that it would be discussed by the whole country. Hence, it is the people, all people, who play the role of the political opposition in Switzerland. According to Google, Switzerland has a capital, and is Bern. But not really. The federal parliament is simply located there, so it is only an administrative capital. Zurich, Geneva, or Lausanne are no less worthy of the title of a capital. But the thing is that in this country, the main cities of all cantons are equal to one another, so there is no room for a special capital one. I know it's a little overwhelming, but here's another interesting fact. Switzerland has been and remains a country whose government and people do not plan to enter the European Union, like ever. Some even call Swiss Eurosceptics. There are several reasons for this decision. Let's quickly cover them all, so you get the idea. The European Union is not a state, like the Swiss Confederation or the United States. The EU includes independent countries that have agreed to discuss and resolve some issues together, but far from all. Many countries have agreed to join the EU because they are attracted by the common market, the possibility of free movement, the unhindered movement of goods, and everything else. For less developed countries, integration into the European area is indeed a profitable step. But in the case of Switzerland, the benefits are not obvious, since Switzerland is already very independent and prosperous, and in addition, it values its independence so much that it doesn't agree to share the powers and rights to its own state power. Also, at the end of the 19th century, Switzerland implemented a strong geopolitical doctrine of armed neutrality that survived 2 world wars and it still applies. One of the reasons for the reluctance to join the European Union is that Switzerland would have to follow the foreign policy and strategies of the European bloc, which would destroy the country's status as an international arbiter and supporter of peace negotiations. The neutrality of Switzerland is officially recognized and protected by international treaties, and the country has maintained a position of neutrality in the world affairs for many years. And what does this mean? The armed neutrality of the country. It is surprising, but for centuries the country has adhered to this position. Many believe that the army in Switzerland, a quiet and peaceful European country, performs only a decorative function. But this is not so. The Swiss army has more than 160,000 people, not including reservists, which makes it one of the largest in Europe. Also in Switzerland, unlike many of its neighbors, compulsory conscription remains. The law states that every male Swiss is liable for military service. Interestingly, at least 2/3 of the young Swiss are declared fit for service. And every year, about 20,000 people undergo basic trainings for 18 weeks, or 23 weeks for special forces. Well, the service itself runs from 19 to 40 years. The total term of soldiers' military service consists of at least 330 days. But it's not about once and for all. Every service runs little by little every year. The first stage is called School of Recruits. This is the main basic part of military service, which lasts 3 to 4 months, and the remaining days are split into weeks so that during their whole life, a Swiss man is called up once every 2 years for 3 weeks until he's 40. Also, every year this man is obligated to pass the standards for shooting using a gun or pistol. So, in total, his service lasts less than a year, which is shorter than in most countries, but much more efficient since he trains during his whole life. Also, at the end of the mandatory military service, many choose to keep their personal equipment, including all their weapons, and it is allowed. And a cherry on top of all sad, after the end of World War II, Switzerland introduced new building regulations and began to build houses with concrete ceilings 16 inches thick. This way, all constructions would remain steel through any bombings. In the 1960s, the Swiss built radiation and explosion-proof shelters capable of withstanding the pressure from a nuclear explosion. And there are explosion-proof shelters everywhere, which is supposed to accommodate the entire population of Switzerland, and yet have a room for lucky visitors. In small Swiss towns, there are large underground garages that can serve as pressurized public shelters with hospitals and emergency command posts. But in peacetime, many private shelters serve as wine cellars and pantries. You remember the last time Switzerland was involved in the Napoleonic Wars that began with the French Revolution. And there is a story that kind of helped me to understand the nature or essence of a Swiss man. During the French Revolution, 1,100-man Swiss guardsmen protected the palace of King Louis. It was stormed by revolutionary forces, and King ordered his guards to surrender their weapons. He didn't want to shoot his people back. 650 Swiss guards died, and many of those who survived the storming were hauled and hung later. Swiss guards served the king of another country, held their duty, and remained strong. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below. I would love to share more of such episodes with you guys. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you soon.